Good afternoon, everyone, and I want to thank you for joining us for this final edition of our Art Talk series, which features visiting artists currently showing in our gallery. This is part of our centennial celebration, and what a great way to end. Today, we are very fortunate to have the amazing John Dempsey, former professor here at Mott Community College. I'm joined by my colleague, Tim Kranz, who will be assisting in today's talk. And we're very excited to have John return home with us today to share his work. And it's amazing. If you have not come to see this exhibition will be up for 2 more weeks. So we hope that you can come in and see it in person. So today, John Dempsey, as I mentioned, he was a professor here at Mott for over 25 years, where he taught painting, drawing, and design. He was an adjunct drawing instructor also at the College for Creative Studies in Detroit, until he moved his painting studio to Hillsborough, North Carolina. His educational background includes a BFA degree from Michigan State University, an MFA degree from Central Washington University, and he also has studied painting at Wayne State and Arizona State Universities. His exhibitions have been all over. Most recently, he had Fabrication in Transit, Works on Paper here at the Flint Institute of Arts. John Dempsey, The American Chronicle and the Glare series at the Midland Center for the Arts in Midland, Michigan. He's also exhibited in a number of places, including Take Place at the Art Gallery in Chicago, Illinois. So, John, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us today and to talk about your exhibition, which is titled Alla Prima, correct?
Yes, Alla Prima. Thank you, Jim. And I wanted to thank you and Tim Kranz and the Fine Arts faculty for extending an invitation to exhibit during the centennial year.
Well, this is the best way that we could end everything, John. I mean, you're like family to us, and we miss you, and we need to see more of you. So,
well, yes, I miss all you guys and Flint quite. Margot and I, my wife and I, have visited back in Flint whenever we can, and we do miss the place rather extensively.
We'll have to find more excuses to bring you here. So,
yes, you're always welcome to come see me, man. I miss you guys.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, Tim.
Come visit.
Oh,
sorry, I wasn't
okay.
here. I don't know why I yelled it. But yeah, come visit, man. I miss you guys. We spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, so I've been following the season lineup of shows and artist talks, so that has been keeping us a little connected. We've enjoyed that. And also I wanted to thank, just at the outset, Joshua Justice, your tech support specialist, because he offered to mat and frame much of the work that's in the show, and that made it logistically possible to exhibit there at the Fine Arts Gallery. So thanks to him and his work.
Thank you. He said thank you.
So maybe, John, you can tell us a little bit about this exhibition and share some insights into the title and how it translates to the work, and all your amazingness.
Yes, thank you. Well, we could start the slideshow now. I have some notes here that I'll be reading from as we work through this presentation. It should take maybe 20, 25 minutes and leave us plenty of time for questions or discussion as well. So the work currently on view in Alla Prima is not work that was made to be exhibited. It consists of paintings and drawings made during the painting and drawing classes that I taught there at Mott Community College, and also College for Creative Studies and elsewhere. My teaching, as Jim mentioned, was primarily focused on drawing, 2D design, and painting, and I retired from Mott in 2016, 8 years ago. So the work was in the show was done along with students during various class sessions. And my intention with the exhibition was to share work with the Mott Fine Arts students that might encourage them and that they could relate to based on their own studio drawing and painting efforts. And hopefully some of the work here will reinforce their experiences. But before discussing the work in Alla Prima, I would like to show some examples of my main studio practice, which is large-scale contemporary landscape paintings they are the focus of my studio work and exhibition activities, and it might help put the show in a little better context. So next slide, if you would, please. Okay, so first I'd like to show some work in an installation that took place at a show at Trax Gallery in Lake City, South Carolina. You can go to the next slide. And it includes some installation shots from there. The Lake City is about 50 miles, I think, west of Myrtle Beach and south of Florence in South Carolina. And they have an exhibition that takes place in April there that turns the city into a gallery space similar to Art Prize. It's called Art Fields, and during April, Lake City, which is about the size of Holly, turns into like one big gallery for around 10 or 12 days. And they have awards. It's a Southeastern regional kind of art prize. So next slide. They have renovated a number of galleries and studios there in Lake City, South Carolina, and Trax Gallery was one of the galleries where they show exhibit artwork year-round. It's 2 large storefronts that have been converted into gallery space. So this gives you, next slide, please, some idea of the installation there. There were 20 plus paintings, mostly large-scale paintings that I have in storage here in North Carolina that had the opportunity to show. So next slide, please. This is still Trax Gallery, Lake City, South Carolina, down in the low country where the swamp fox, Marianne Francis, hung out. Next slide. And just to give some scale, and then I believe one more slide in this series. Okay, so next. Thank you. So this is, as Jim mentioned, also Fabrication in Transit. This was an exhibition that the FIA put on in their graphics gallery, which is the gallery next to the library in the museum there. And it was work dedicated to work on paper. It covered work from as early as 1981, 1982. So I dug deep, and it mostly showed installations of the interiors of factory and like factory interiors and such. So next slide here. This is an installation shot of Fabrication in Transit. This show came down in January. Next slide. And then another installation shot. And then finally, one more, if you would, please. Or one, actually, another one. So this is shows the interior of GMAC Flint that was taken in the 1980s or so. It was a large-scale watercolor. And the show Fabrication in Transit consisted most of more recent watercolors that I've been doing on paper that deal with industrial environment. Next slide, please. Also, I'm currently at the FIA, and I encourage students to use the FIA more often than you do because it's such a really great resource and a wonderful place. We really miss that place. The programming, the exhibitions surrounding the programming are all just really an amazing resource that most cities don't really have. I think the FIA now is certainly a destination museum, and it's I would argue it's the second best museum in Michigan right behind the Detroit Institute of Arts in terms of collections and programming. So it's something that you should be taking advantage of while you're in Flint studying art, for sure. This currently there's a show in the Dow Gallery that's called Made in Michigan, and I believe it's up through the middle of June. So if you're interested at the FIA, you can see a piece they have in their collection. It's a show that consists of work in the collection that it was made by artists that live in Michigan or were born in Michigan or have a Michigan connection like that. So next slide. These next two slides are the last two, just to introduce you to my studio work. Those of you unfamiliar with it. And incidentally, over the last many decades, it's the work that you've seen here has been shown at Buckham Gallery over the years. This is a recent painting completed and exhibited in a show called Duet that I had with a ceramicist, Judith Ernst. And then you see her work in the slide as well. Well, this is called Glare number 19, Shimmy Shake. And the Glare series is a series of large-scale landscape paintings, which is what I consider these that I've been working on. And then the next slide, please. So this is the most recently completed painting, which is titled Glare number 20. And it's called Glare number 20, Oopsie Daisy. And it kind of shows you where the studio practice is now, and along with one of Judith Ernst's vessels that are amazing. Okay, so that's my studio practice. So if you go to the next slide, please. The show itself is titled Alla Prima, which is Italian and roughly translated all at once. Okay, so let's see. Alla Prima consists of two different types of figure studies. Paintings done as demonstrations during painting class at Mott, and another group of drawings done during drawing classes there at Mott CC, as well as at other schools and at drawing studios. Next slide, please. So Alla Prima, this is a definition taken from the interweb, and you can read through that. But it basically, it's often used to refer to wet on wet, but technically it can also refer to the process that I'll explain to you here in a second, which is a way of starting paintings. But the show itself consists of these two types of figure studies. Next slide. First, I'll talk a little bit about the paintings that are in the show that were done as demonstrations for first semester painting students. These preliminary studies were made during painting class to demonstrate a traditional dark light halftone technique for starting a painting with oil paint. Next slide, please. So one traditional method of starting an oil painting is by using a dark light halftone process of painting in the composition all at once, or alla prima, using an earth tone thinned down with turpentine. The results are often nicknamed tobacco juice paintings among Western Art Academy students and soy sauce paintings among their Asian counterparts. The resulting study is used as an underpainting that is then painted over with a full color palette, hiding it from view in the finished painting. So Alla Prima contains a number of these tobacco juice paintings created while demonstrating this technique to first semester painting students at Mott Community College. The demo became more fun and the banter livelier when the students became the subject matter. Many of these were given away to the sitter, and my souvenirs are what are being shown here. So the next slide, please. Trying to keep up with my notes here a little bit, excuse me. So with this type of technique, a board or a canvas is coated with a mass tone made by thinning an earth tone down with turpentine. So the mass tone is an important idea in painting and drawing, and that is the value where on the grayscale the image or the area that what your subject matter is, what the average value is. So it's determining kind of the overall tone or value of the composition and where that would be placed on the grayscale. without setting a mass tone, you often create images in drawing and in painting that have kind of a transparent look to them. They don't have like a real mass to them. It's a difficult sort of concept to grasp, I think. But if you squint really hard, and I can just take my glasses off, you can kind of get a feel for where on the value scale the image that you're working with, the scene that you're working with is, and then try to match that initially. It can be done with toned paper as well, which I'll show you a little later with the drawings. This in the painting, you establish that initially. So often when I did this demo, I would run into the wood shop and grab like a piece of wood that was laying around, a piece of plywood, take it and gesso it, and then put this mass tone on it, set it aside. The initial tone on the board is made by thinning an earth tone with turpentine, such as raw or burnt umber or sienna traditionally. It is then set aside to allow the turpentine to evaporate out. And this takes about 20 or 30 minutes or so. You can go to the next slide if you would. After 20 or 30 minutes, the turps has dried, and be sure to work in a well-ventilated space, but the linseed oil in the paint has not. Now the painter can use a rag dipped in turps to rub out and remove the paint to create the white areas, the highlights, and can add shadow with additional paint that has been thinned with enough turps to make it fluid, but not so much turps as to make it too transparent. This creates dark light mass tone, the mass tone being the initial value laid down. The three values that you need to create, the minimum of three values that you need to create an illusion of form and space. Next slide, please. Check and see where we're at. So often I would set up and do these. I remember one time when I had a student that basically heckled me through the whole process because there is sort of a sense of performance here. That student shall remain nameless, but it was fun. The students were the subject matter, and often I would just start talking extemporaneously just to keep them there so that I could continue the painting and try to make something look like something in the end. Next slide, please. So these are done in one session. If sometimes you might watch on television a art history special and the X-ray paintings, older paintings like from the 1700s, 1800s, 18th, 19th century, to look for the underpainting. This is what they're X-raying for, is to look at the drawing. This is a technique that isn't used so much in university art programs now, but I always like to show it to students. Not many students actually adopted this method of painting, but it's a way of painting from direct observation that you might see as beneficial and useful for the in an academy situation, in a art studio, painting studio situation. You set the value and the drawing before you go to a full color palette. This is covered, of course, in the final painting, thus the X-rays. And you could go to the next one as well. So again, you'll find this technique used more, and ironically, I think in Asia and in China particularly, when you go to art school, you're taught these techniques and that are academy techniques that you might run into if you go to school here, say at the Art Student League, which is kind of a traditional art academy as opposed to a university art program. So next slide, we can move on from these panels. And so now I'd like to talk about the other group in the show, Alla Prima, which is the figure drawings as well, because it's kind of an odd mix. If you walk into the gallery without me explaining things, you might wonder what the heck is going on here between this work. Why was it chosen and put together? It's basically just to share with students things that I made but don't necessarily exhibit. So don't tell anybody about this work if you see the show. So let's see. The figure drawings were done during various figure drawing and drawing classes, as well as at a drawing studio in New York City that I would go to while working there at a friend's studio during some summers. As for these drawings, I came to the realization that I was talking too much with my drawing students during classes. And you go to the next. Oh, okay, that's good. I came to the realization that I was talking too much with my drawing students during classes. Too much talking in drawing class can be counterproductive. You can either have a conversation or you can draw. It is difficult, if not impossible, to do both at the same time effectively. So in an effort to become a better instructor, I switched from coffee to green tea for my 8 o'clock classes, and I started talking less and drawing more along with the students during class. Students seemed to like that I would draw with them, particularly during figure drawing class. We seemed to be working more as a group that way, and students could take comfort in my own struggles and failures, which are a natural and ever-present part of the drawing process. So what is a figure drawing? I think of figure drawing as a group effort involving 4 collaborators, and that figure drawing sessions are collaborative events. Can you have the next slide, please? First and foremost, the model is the star of the show in figure drawing. They are the subject and the focus of the drawing session. The models and the instructor are the ones who should mostly drive the tone and the atmosphere for the session. The drawings that are made during any drawing session should have evidence of the feeling of that session. Although a sense of normalcy and routine should be established within the studio with rules of behavior and etiquette for figure drawing class, figure drawing remains a process of a psychologically rooted visual interpretation of the model and the moment. So next slide, please. Second, in the collaboration are the materials. The materials determine the final form of any drawing, and the materials will do what they will do. If the individual drawing is too focused on controlling the materials, that usually shows up in the final drawing. In that case, the drawing will be of little interest other than as evidence of the drawer's control over their choice of materials. And that's entertaining, that's nice. It's nice to see drawings done technically perfectly and with a lot of evidence of time, but that's not the focus of the figure drawings in the show here. Drawings that draw attention to the facility of the artists themselves are interesting, but to my eye usually lack connection with a more interesting dynamic, which is really this the third collaborator. Next slide, please. And you can go to the next slide from here as well. The drawer channels and interprets the figure while conjuring up form from the materials. They are tasked with channeling and animating the model's action in collaboration with their materials, while in empathy with the figure and the pose. As with many sporting events, poses are timed. The race is on, and that requires, I believe, a focus and a certain urgency on the part of the drawer. In class, I stress taking a variety of approaches to drawing with an emphasis on gesture drawing, analytical drawing, and structural drawing, particularly in figures drawing class. Students are encouraged to take in different types of visual information so that the drawing could contain a variety of that visual information. Next slide, please. I would look through my drawings from a drawing session and keep those that reminded me of the poses happening that day in class. In order for a drawing to be effective, it should evoke that specific moment in time. So if I saw evidence of that in any of the drawings, then I would keep those. I encourage students to do the same. Look for the drawings that evoked a feeling. This show contains some of those drawings. They aren't meant to be finished artwork. made for formal presentation. They are more like souvenirs or notations from specific moments in time. And next slide, please. Some of you may recognize Liz there a little. Next slide, please. And then you can go to the last slide here. So the fourth collaborator in figure drawing, to my mind, is the viewer. And I suspect that people might walk into the Fine Arts Gallery, see the drawings and oil sketches in alla prima, and notice that they don't look much like photographs and simply turn around and walk out. An art exhibition is a commons. It's a public area where people can come together to experience artwork and share in that experience. One part of that process is that you are free to draw your own conclusions based on your own unique experience. And everyone is entitled to their own experience. I'm always curious about how people react to my work when it's being exhibited, but I don't expect for it to elicit any specific response. The viewer can connect or not. My hope is that the viewer extends an effort to try and put what they are seeing into some type of sympathetic context, but that isn't always the case. Yeah, so you can go to the next slide, actually the real last slide. So question, why, just to close in closing here, why study figure drawing? Drawing from direct observation requires the drawer to visually connect with what they are experiencing while grappling with materials in an effort to give that experience a visual form. It has always fascinated me how available and salient the world is when we open our eyes, look outside of ourselves for a moment, and allow it to fill our vision. Yet how difficult it is to reproduce that experience by drawing it on paper. It is all right there for us to see, and yet reproducing that experience by rubbing dirt around on a piece of paper is a complex problem and a difficult process, fraught with the psychology of how we understand our world and each other. Despite the challenges of drawing from direct observation, it requires attention to a specific place and a specific point in time. Both of these concepts are central to the visual arts in my mind. I believe that it is important for artists to visually connect directly and in the moment with their circumstance of place, and that drawing from direct observation is a very good way of doing that. Important even if for no other reason than to remind ourselves that there is an entire universe that has been provided for us to explore visually in our studio practice and in the faith that there is a lot to learn and share. So that brings me to the end of my notes. And hopefully we have time for questions or comments or further discussion if you like. I have a couple questions I could throw out if people are too reticent. Anyway, this is a little odd presenting this way. I can't see the folks in the room, but thank you for...
There's no one here. No, okay. Say hi, you guys.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Belva has a question.
What's your favorite medium to work with in for figure drawing? I noticed a erasure of like what looked like charcoal in
Yes.
figure drawings.
And John, can you hear them okay?
Pardon?
Can you hear her okay?
I did hear the question, but it might help to repeat it if...
So you guys too, in case you weren't here, there's the microphone is right there. So you do need to make sure that if you're over in there that you do speak up so that they can hear you. So okay, what was
Oh, great question. I appreciate it. My favorite material. And I should mention Tom Bonnert and Tom Newsom, who basically mentored me as a drawing instructor at Mott. And Tom Newsom, in particular, he had this method that he would get students to take a piece of charcoal and draw a rectangle on their paper in order to kind of define their ring of activity. rather than using the edge of the paper itself, and then tone that with a mass tone, basically what I was talking about with the dark light halftone process of painting with oils. And I kind of picked up on that eventually. I'm kind of a slow learner, but Tom's method would be to tone the paper. Then you can erase out your highlights and you can add in your shadows. So this is as simple as that dark light halftone. One hand you have an eraser, the other hand you have a piece of charcoal, and you can just go to town. So rather than trying to control the materials, you have kind of set up a situation to simplify the process. Hopefully I explained that well enough. It's messy. In fact, Kate Smith used to have what she called the messy method of in figure drawing, but I think that was more with paint and with wet materials. But that is my favorite way. If I'm going to a figure drawing session, what I'll do is maybe even tone a couple different pieces of paper with the charcoal and rub it out and smooth it over, and then I'm all at the ready to sit up and have a go with it. Often I'll start with pencil just to do the gesture or the initial composition, and then start in with the eraser and such. So that's a good way to do it. I hate watercolors, but I spend a lot of time with them because they tend to do what I'm trying to accomplish with those factory interiors. But I don't like have a specific drawing favorite. I know a lot of students really cling to the pencil and they like to put their hand on the paper and go back and forth like this for hours on end, which is fun, but kind of restrictive and slow. So experiment.
I just want to jump in and say I love like how much you're reinforcing a lot of the good things that I try to do and try to get them to do. Just watching their faces when you say things that I say to them all the time is entertaining. Right. I love it.
Right. Well, you know.
More questions for John? Please.
John, I have a question for you. Oh,
yes,
I'm sorry. So, you know, I had the pleasure of getting to work with you, and also being your student. But
yeah.
I
wasn't going to mention that, but
it's okay. They know I'm old. So, but I think that, like, for me, this exhibition is just, I love it because I love that you were in your class, you were drawing, you were observing your students as they were working, and you're capturing those moments. And I think about like being at meetings with you, and you were always sketching. You were always sketching people. You were always doing something.
Tom was like that. Tom Bonner was always sketching as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that that's such an important part. Like, I think it's that activity and always kind of perfecting and looking for those moments and capturing it. So I wonder, now that you're retired and you're I mean, I know that your main body of work are these large scale pieces, but what do you do? What are you doing to practice and to always keep yourself active with your practice?
Well, I have the luxury of a studio in an old textile mill on the Eno River, the Eno Arts Mill. It's the Orange County Arts Commission rents out about 25 spaces, and it's like a 700,000 square foot textile mill that has like a school in it and these kitchens for a market that's near here. And I don't know what all is in there, but so I go, like I get up and I go to work. I go to the studio. It's really a luxury. So I'm still painting regularly. I should go to some sketching. There are a lot of like community ed situations where they have figure drawing sessions where you can actually go and pay $10 or $15, and they have models that come in and you can draw. So I should be doing that a little more often. But to answer your question directly, I don't do much. I just paint, basically.
So you say like you go to work every day. What does that mean to you? Are you going in for like, you go in and spend 5 hours in the studio, or it's like, I feel like it today? How does that translate? Because I think as students, right? Students struggle
Right.
with the balance of life,
Right.
other responsibilities. How do I get my coursework done? But as a practicing artist, how does that discipline play into it for you to make sure you're continuously moving forward and creating new bodies of work to share?
Well, I think I forget the name of the book, but someone was talking about painters, and that painters paint when the agony of not painting overcomes the agony of painting. So it's kind of a flippant answer to you, but there's kind of a balance that goes on there. And a lot of, I've always painted as kind of a discipline. I always approached it as a discipline. I don't describe myself as an artist. I describe myself as a landscape painter. And I've always done that. Now, people, if you work 2 hours a day, if you actually paint 2 hours a day over a year, over a lifetime, you can accomplish a lot. It sounds silly, and it doesn't sound like that much time, but like if you know, some people spend more time exercising than they do on their art, and but just, I don't know, I would encourage students not to beat themselves up if they're not like spending as much time as they think they should be on their artwork, because I think that's pretty much always the case. Because you do have life, you have and particularly students too, you have all the student stuff. I was a graduate student and dropped out because I didn't have time to paint. With the graduate program was interfering in how much I was actually producing. And I ended up going back to grad school and eventually finishing out my degree, but in a better situation, and one that was a little more conducive to working in the studio. But I don't know if that's kind of talking around what your question was, but it's always something that you work out. And but you know, make decisions that reinforce what you're trying to accomplish with your work, and things will, well, work out in the long run. They should.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
We had a student that had a question.
Hello.
Yeah.
I noticed while I was in the gallery that with the figure drawings, you often mixed certain mediums, like you've got pencil, charcoal, and then you've got pastels, pencils. I think there was one that was charcoal pastels. Is there a reason you mix mediums like that? Is there like?
Well, just over time, I don't really, yes. As an art instructor, and Tim might have this experience too, and Jim as well, is that a lot of students leave a lot of supplies behind. And so like I would collect them in a box at the end of the class and then have them there for students who come in and want to experiment with this material or that material. So I would carry around like 3 or 4 large boxes just filled with various drawing materials. Drawing is, in a way, you can simplify drawing into this idea of you're fighting for contrast. Okay, Matisse, I think, famously said, "I don't paint things, I paint the difference between things." So you're painting to create contrast, and one way of doing that is to combine different materials in different ways, and constantly kind of think about how can I, you know, make even more space visually for myself with another type of contrast. So like I was thinking about this just a little, you know, while I was putting this presentation together. I was teaching a gesture drawing class at CCS, and they have automotive design students there, and they are amazing drafts people. Their drawing skills are just off the charts. And the students would come in, they'd had these grayscale, these pencils that are like markers that were kind of a neutral, sort of a cool grayscale that you just bought, the like 25-step grayscale, and they'd have those lying around, and so I'd pick those up, and those are great because you could go in and establish all these lines. It's just, you know, I think there's a tendency for students, particularly in beginning drawing class, to think of the materials and the medium and the media as kind of discrete and distinct. So now we're going to do charcoal. Now we're going to do pencil. Now we're going to do pastels. But again, to go back to Tom Newsom, he was like a omnivore when it came to materials. Anything was in play, including the coffee cup. So I just have a big box of stuff that I grab and try to get away with making a mark with it. If that addresses your question.
Thank you, sir.
Did I freeze on the screen?
Yeah, you did on the one screen, but you're not on. Question? None? Okay. I think I had some, but I lost them. Or I mean, you kind of covered them mostly. So, just out of curiosity, what's the largest painting you've ever done? Do you know?
Well, the one I showed, that's the Buick City, that's it up at the FIA, is one of the larger ones. At least it was one of the heavier ones.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm kind of older, so I've noticed a phenomenon that paintings get heavier as you age. I don't know what they gain weight.
And the floor gets
Sort of
further
like,
away sometimes, somehow too, right?
yeah. So I had a question for folks. If I put a question together in case people ran out of questions.
Okay.
So we can go to that if you want at some
Sure.
point. I'd
Sure.
welcome people to butt in. So this question is based on a couple of art writers. One, Nelson Goodman, who wrote a book called Language of Art, which is an interesting book, and another, Jason Gager, who wrote a book called Aesthetics in Painting, which is a nice little compilation of essays on painting. So I'll run through this. It's a question with a preface. Rather than looking at place as and this is paraphrased from Jason Gager, so it might be a little cumbersome, but rather than looking at place as an external loci, for the purpose of discussion, let's look at place as its perception within a viewer. Drawing from direct observation uses experience of place as a basis for examining and coding, in effect drawing, a wide variety of systems of experience and methods of understanding. The process of drawing then becomes a process of both the interpretation and the construction of place. Both sides of this process are fraught with possibilities through the process of creating a dense code, the drawing, that links signs, marks, with their reference, the subject of the drawing. And here's the question. Leonardo da Vinci is an example of an artist credited with finding viable new ways of understanding our world based on observational drawing and painting. Question, is that still possible? Can an individual, through direct observation, find and show us viable new ways of understanding our experience and our understanding of the world? Is that even possible?
That's his question.
I would say yes. I feel like
Can you hear?
Yes.
I feel like anytime I look at anybody's work, I always feel like I saw something new, or I saw something I haven't seen before. And that's genuinely because not everybody sees everything the same way. Everybody's perspective is different, and based on how they see things, the world could look completely different from observation alone.
Okay, nice, good.
Anybody else?
Oh,
Anybody else? Belva?
I was just gonna say that as people keep changing, as the world keeps changing, direct observation is probably even more important because the pace of change has happened so quickly. Capturing that seems as urgent, like now more urgent now that as people and things and society is progressing at such an, to me, I'm getting older, alarming pace.
So there's kind of a grounding process at work, I think. maybe that's what your answer or contribution suggested to me. Nice.
A grounding in, but also sort of like a set point, like markers. I guess I'm think like a historian. So I think of watching and observing and slowing down, having those people that can do that to capture what our feeling was at this particular point in time. How important that is, and even more so now, or as much so now as it was then. I think I'm articulating that well,
Yes.
or something.
Okay. John, you said you had another question to ask?
No, that was it. That was my only question.
What were those two books that you mentioned? Aesthetics and Painting, and what was the other one? You remember?
Yes, it was Aesthetics and Painting is by Jason Geiger,
Mhm.
Gaiger, and Language of Art is by Nelson Goodman.
I think I have that one.
Nelson Goodman, it's interesting. There's some interest, if you're a painter, I think they're kind of interesting reads. They're more kind of difficult to get through with the language and such, but
Yeah, we might have copies of them in our library too, because we still have all the books that we used to have in there too. So, okay. Thank you. Oh, I have another student has another question.
I had forgotten it at first, but you talking about the book made me remember it. Do you have any books that you would recommend to aspiring students or people just looking for inspiration?
There's two books that I would use in painting class all the time. If I can, hope I get this right. One is a brilliant essay that's the notes are longer than the essay itself, but it's, I think, a very profound piece on painting in particular. It's called Perspective as Symbolic Form by Erwin Panofsky. Perspective as Symbolic Form. And if you think of it, just the title alone is kind of sets off a train of thought. And it touches also on this idea that a couple students had chimed in on, was that how we perceive the world has changed over time. And it doesn't mean that necessarily we have a better understanding of the world now than we had. But we do have a different understanding of our world now than we had. If you study like the concept of what the universe looked like in Middle Ages, and then compare that to how we perceive the universe now, it's really very different and profoundly and very basically different how we really see our world. So that's a good one. The other is just for vocabulary was Heinrich Wölfflin. Heinrich Wölfflin, Wofflin, with some type of Germanic accent on one of the vowels. And what was that one? I'm drawing a blank on the title, but he wrote a number of books. He's kind of a traditional old school German art historian. So he's kind of not in the normally studied, but he gives a vocabulary, a way of talking about and discussing paintings that are good. I also had an instructor, if you can find a copy of his book, it was The Changing Image of Pictorial Space by William Dunning. And it was roughly a updating of Erwin Panofsky and kind of applying it to more contemporary art practice and painting practice. The Changing Image of Pictorial Form. I think that's the title. But anyway.
I think you gave me a copy of that.
I might have. Yeah, I used to give copies of these to students on occasion.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm writing them all down. So if any of you guys didn't catch that or you don't watch the thing, we might be able to do it. Looks like Dylan, looks like Dylan might have Googled a couple of them real quick too. So yeah, so Dylan and I got a lot of those written down. So, but I do think we might have some of these too, or I might have some of these. So that's awesome. Thank you, John. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you're quite welcome. I used to go to, in when I was in a city, go to bookstores and just look at their art section and pull randomly, just grab a book and say, okay, I'm going to read this. And they're usually not like the most entertaining reads, but they do. It's like raw material. It's like buying a tube of cadmium red, buy a book, and it feeds into your art practice, I believe, over time.
Well, and you bring up a good point too, and just, just to say, just in case, for next time you're back in town too, in case you guys, haven't really ever been to Totem Books. Totem Books is a used bookstore on the edge of downtown by Whitehorse. They, they have a, they have a lot of, art books specifically, but their collection on art books specifically gets bigger and bigger all the time, and they have a ton more in the basement as well. I know because I know where they came from, and I also know because I've seen them. And I think they have a Chagall. I think it's Chagall. They have a copy of a book of his that's actually autographed too.
Wow.
So,
Nice.
yeah. I almost bought it, but not yet. All right. Any other questions for John? Okay. Oh, we got one more.
So like capturing a moment, like in a drawing and drawing from a picture, like night and day, like completely different. So what advice would you give to an art student who's like struggling to draw from reality when it's constantly changing?
Changing it. So you're talking about drawing from direct observation?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's kind of a frustrating aspect of drawing. It's just that elusive quality of, trying to get the form down over time, and freeze the form in some fashion. I think I had one instructor that said the best painters, and I think by drawing could be included in this, are the people who have really the highest tolerance for on their level of frustration. So I think the trick is to not beat yourself up while you're being frustrated, because things will happen. And I think one thing you could do that might be a practical answer would be just to go to shorter poses and do more of them, and then just wad up and throw across the room the ones that are totally frustrating and anger you. It's kind of cathartic. And just keep the ones that kind of work out, because there is a big element of chance in any of this. It's kind of like like it's almost, not supposed to use sport analogies, but a figure drawing pose is timed. It's an event. It's something that starts and ends, like a basketball game or a hockey game. And within that, you win or you lose, basically. And sometimes you'll look back and a drawing that initially you kind of maybe surprise yourself with or disgust yourself with, actually has something that you find of interest when you go back and look at it. It puts you back in that moment, or puts you back in that feeling. So anyway, hopefully that addresses your question, because I think it's a really valid and shared one.
The beginning of what you said, especially, really, kind of got me in a good way, but also cracked me up at the same time, because one of the students is in the room right now. I just told her yesterday, I said, I don't know. I don't know. I always felt like I'm not really actually a good artist at all. I think I'm just stubborn and hate myself enough to not give up on things until they're very good, or until they're good.
Yes. Well, stubborn is a good quality in the arts.
It is. It is. I think that's one thing that, one of the many things you and I have in common is, we stick with things, or we try our best, and John and I both have a similar past with grad school, and John, I've said a lot of things to you, and I know we got to wrap this up soon, but I just want to say One thing I don't know if I've really ever said to you is, when I went through my grad school issue, I came back to the places that I had gone to grad school or to undergrad and talked to some of my mentors. I think I was either wanting approval to, walk away or approval, stay walked away or to go back. And I ran into John, and John had never been my professor, but he had always been, my friend, and we became more and more friends uh, as time went on. But you really, in my opinion, are one of those people that I ran into you and you gave me just a quick little talk, and that's when I found out about your grad school thing and mine being very similar, and that really helped get me to where I am today. So you've helped me be where I am today in a lot of ways, but I just wanted you to know that that talk that we had that you probably don't even remember, it really, meant a lot to me. I needed to hear from somebody that had been there, especially painted, So thank
Yeah,
you.
and I appreciate it. And I think people should seek out, you don't need that much support to keep going, but you do need support. So, there are people that will do that.
Yep, exactly.
Was I sober
You were
when that
working,
conversation took place?
so probably not. No. So it was here. It was here.
Probably so.
I had ran into Tom Bonner, and he had said some things, but I think he also was like, get off the, S or get off the pot, right? So, yeah, you just kind of told me your story, and so I really appreciate it. But yeah, you guys, John and I have a very good friendship, and I miss you being around here. I really truly do. And so anyway, John, anything else that you would like to say?
Well, I miss Flint. I've had a studio there for decades down in Buckham Alley. Last thing I'd like to say is, well, congratulations on the upcoming student show. The Buckham Gallery is having its 40th anniversary exhibition next month as well. So after you go to your opening, you can swing by and check out some Flint history for the art scene, the downtown art scene, as it were. But just thank you again for the opportunity to exhibit. Hopefully the work is received in the spirit that it's shared. And best of luck to everybody. And I appreciate you listening to my little rambling here.
Absolutely. And you're showing in the Buckham show, right?
I have a small painting that I dropped off with Michelle when I was there last fall.
I'm showing as well too, so it's good.
Oh, good. Nice.
Yeah, John and I both are a big part of Buckham Gallery. Most of the founders of most of the founders of Buckham had something to do with mod as well too. So
And the students at Mott Community College were always rather directly and deeply involved with Buckham. It's a little different now, but still it's another resource like the FIA for folks. But anyway, thank you.
I had work as a student at Mott. We had our student show at Buckham a few times, and my work was there. That's how I got familiar with Buckham. So, all right. Well, yeah. Thank you very much, John, as always. And I'm going to read notes if you guys can't tell. I want to thank Brian Williams and the entire media services team for their behind the scenes magic to make today's live stream possible, and Josh Justice, our gallery coordinator, who is celebrating his 1-year anniversary as a Mott employee, for working with our artists to schedule these talks. We would like to invite you to the opening of the 66th Annual Student Art Show on May 17th at 6 p.m. here in the Visual Arts and Design Center. It's an amazing display of our students and their talent, and we hope you are able to join us. John, thank you again for spending time with us today and for sharing your insights and stories into your amazing work. And the exhibition, do not forget, everybody, the exhibition will still be up until Friday, April 26th. So thank you, John. Thank you so much. And
Quite
please,
welcome.
I should call you in a few days. We should talk. So
Yes.
goodbye, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So thank you. Bye, John. Thank you.